The pocket watch. A story of poison, betrayal, and a father's love. Take it off now, the collector screamed, lunging across the display table, his face white as chalk. /U 2014, and that was the moment Daniel Mercer realized his son had tried to kill him. The watch had arrived on Daniel's 55th birthday, wrapped in brown paper and tied with kitchen twine, the way his son Marcus had always wrapped gifts since he was a boy. /U 2014. Never bothering with ribbons or tape, just the bare, honest economy of a child who couldn't be bothered with pretense. Daniel had smiled when he saw it. He'd smiled and pressed the parcel to his chest for a moment before opening it, because it smelled faintly of Marcus's apartment. /U 2014, that particular mix of old books and coffee grounds and the cedar shavings Marcus kept in little muslin bags inside his closet. Daniel had bought him those cedar bags himself 3 Christmases ago as a joke gift, and Marcus had actually used them. That was the kind of man Marcus was: practical, unsentimental, but never careless. Inside the brown paper was a pocket watch. It was a beautiful thing. /U 2014, a hunter case piece in rose gold, the cover engraved with a sailing ship mid-storm, waves curling like fingers around the hull. Daniel had turned it over in his hands and found on the reverse a single line of script so fine he'd had to hold it under his reading glasses, for the man who always knew when to hold on. He'd had to sit down after reading that, had to pour himself 2 fingers of the scotch he kept for company and drink it alone at his kitchen table while the evening light stretched long across the linoleum. 55 years old, and his son had finally said something that cracked him open. He and Marcus had never been close. /U 2014, not distant, exactly, but separated by some transparent wall neither of them had ever found the door through. Daniel had worked long hours. Marcus had grown up mostly with his mother, and when Caroline died, the two of them had been left alone with their grief and their polite telephone calls and their annual dinners that always ended 20 minutes before either of them was ready to leave. And now this. A pocket watch with a ship on it, and a line that meant Marcus understood something about him. Understood him. Daniel wore it every day for 2 weeks before he took it to the antiques fair. He hadn't planned to, he'd simply found himself walking through the Civic Center on a Saturday morning, following the handmade signs, killing time the way widowers do. /U 2014, filling the hollow hours with motion that resembles purpose. The fair was the usual collection of folding tables and fluorescent lights and old people sitting on camp chairs behind their treasures. Daniel drifted through it without intention, his hand in his jacket pocket, his thumb turning the watch's winding crown the way he'd developed a habit of doing, thinking not thinking. He'd been standing in front of a table of Victorian silverware when the man appeared beside him. "That's a beautiful piece," the man said, nodding at Daniel's hand. Daniel looked down. He'd pulled the watch out without noticing. /U 2014, his thumb still working the crown in slow revolutions. "Thank you," Daniel said. "My son gave it to me." The man was perhaps 65, compact and precise in the way of people who work with their hands. /U 2014, a watchmaker's build, Daniel thought. He wore a linen jacket with a loop clippetto the breast pocket. His eyes were cataloging the watch the way Daniel had seen appraisers catalog things, quickly, hungrily, then carefully still. "May I?" the man said and held out his hand. Something about the directness of it disarmed Daniel. He handed it over. The man turned it front to back. He held it to the light. He produced the loop and examined the engraving on the back. Daniel watched him, vaguely flattered, "the way you are when someone admires something you love." Then the man's expression changed. It was subtle at first. /U 2014, just a tightening around the eyes, a stillness that wasn't the same as the concentrated stillness of inspection. His hands kept moving, but his face stopped entirely, like a clock whose hands continue by momentum after the spring has been cut. "Where did you get this?" he asked. His voice had changed too, gone soft in a way that wasn't gentle. "My son, as I said, for my birthday." And you've been wearing it. 2 weeks every day. The man looked up from the watch and looked directly at Daniel with an expression Daniel had no immediate category for. It was not pity, it was not alarm, it was something anterior to both of those /U 2014, the look of a man doing fast arithmetic about whether there was still time. Take it off now, the man said. I'm sorry. The chain, he said it more urgently, more loudly, and several people nearby looked over. Take the chain off, don't touch the interior /U 2014, don't open the case. I don't understand what /U 2014. Take it off now, and he lunged forward across the display table between them, scattering a tray of silver apostle spoons, knocking his camp chair backward /U 2014, reaching for Daniel's jacket lapel with a sudden physical desperation that was so at odds with his composure of 30 seconds ago that Daniel stumbled back a full step. Hey /U 2014, Daniel grabbed the man's wrist by instinct. The chain, the man's voice dropped abruptly from panic back to that soft, precise register as though he'd caught himself. Please, let me just /U 2014 the chain, take it off and don't let the case touch your skin. Daniel looked at him for a moment, then, because something in the man's eyes had crossed from frightening into genuinely frightened /U 2014, because there is a particular quality of fear in someone who knows what they're afraid of, and it is much more persuasive than hysteria. /U 2014 Daniel reached up and unhooked the chain from his vest buttonhole and held the watch out by its fob, the case dangling free. The man took it with a handkerchief /U 2014 produced from his breast pocket in one practiced movement, wrapped around the case without touching it, held away from his body. Thank you, he said. He was breathing carefully. You've been wearing this against your body for 2 weeks. What is it? Daniel said. His own voice sounded strange to him, like hearing a recording of yourself. What's wrong with the watch? The man looked at him. Do you have anywhere to sit? His name was Gerald Fenn. He had been a forensic consultant for insurance companies for 20 years before he retired to dealing in antique timepieces, a transition he'd made, he told Daniel, because the antique trade and insurance fraud overlapped more than civilians realized. He knew what he was looking for because he'd spent 2 decades learning what people tried to hide. They sat in the Civic Center CAF /U00E9 with 2 cups of bad coffee between them, the watch in its handkerchief on the table, while Gerald explained. The case, he said, was original /U 2014, late Victorian, English-made, good quality, as genuine as it looked. The movement inside was original too, but the lining of the hunter cover /U 2014, the inner surface of the clamshell that pressed against the watch face when closed /U 2014 was not original. It had been replaced with something that, under magnification, showed a distinct texture, a nap almost. Like the finest suede, but wrong color for suede, wrong sheen. What is it? Daniel asked. Gerald looked at him levelly. There are compounds /U 2014, aconitine is the most famous, but there are others /U 2014 that can be prepared in a paste and applied to a surface. Compound is absorbed through skin contact, slowly through a fabric like the lining of a watch case, through friction and heat and time. He paused, through 2 weeks of daily contact. Daniel heard this. He heard it perfectly well, and for a moment the CAF /U 00E9 continued around him /U 2014. A child at the next table dropped a spoon. A barista called an order. The fluorescent light above them hummed its single eternal note /U 2014, and none of it seemed to be in the same room as what Gerald Fenn had just told him. You're saying, Daniel said, that my son gave me a poisoned watch. I'm saying someone gave you a watch that was prepared in a specific and deliberate way that would cause the gradual absorption of a toxic compound through the skin of your hand and wrist. Gerald wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. I don't know who gave it to you. I only know what I see. My son, Daniel said again. Marcus, he gave it to me, it was wrapped in brown paper. He thought of the brown paper, he thought of the kitchen twine and the cedar smell and for the man who always knew when to hold on. 2 weeks, Daniel said. Yes. And I haven't /you 2014, he stopped. He thought about the past 2 weeks, the headaches he'd attributed to poor sleep, the tingling in his right hand, which was the hand he most often used to turn the crown that he'd assumed was the carpal tunnel he'd been ignoring for years, the fatigue, the strange metallic taste at the back of his throat that had come and gone mostly easily explained away. I haven't felt /you 2014. At low exposure levels, the symptoms are easy to miss, particularly if you're not looking for them. Gerald met his eyes. You should see a doctor today, not tomorrow, today. He didn't go to the doctor that day. That was not the choice he made. The choice he made was to drive to Marcus's apartment. He sat in his car outside the building for a long time first, long enough for the afternoon to shift into early evening and for the streetlights to come on one by one along Marcus's street. He sat with his hands on the wheel and thought about what kind of man he was and what kind of man his son was, and whether those two facts were connected by something he'd refused to see. Marcus was 31. He worked in financial planning /you 2014, not a flashy firm, just a solid, medium-sized practice where he'd been for 6 years, steadily working his way up reliably. Competent, he had a girlfriend, Nadia, whom Daniel had met twice and liked. He had friends Daniel didn't know. He had a life Daniel knew only in outline. He had, as far as Daniel had ever been able to tell, no particular grudge /you 2014, no festering wound, no inheritance dispute, no argument left unresolved. They were simply two men who shared a bloodline and a polite estrangement, and apparently, it now appeared, not much else. Unless Daniel had simply not been paying attention. He got out of the car. Marcus answered on the second knock, still in his work clothes, his tie loosened. He looked at Daniel's face and something in his expression shifted /you 2014, not guilt, Daniel thought, not quite /you 2014, but something. Dad, he said, what's wrong? Daniel looked at his son. He thought, I am standing here trying to read your face for a sign that you tried to kill me, and I do not know your face well enough to read it. I have been your father for 31 years, and I do not know your face. Can I come in? He said. They sat in Marcus's living room, the cedar-smelling apartment, and Daniel told him, methodically, without dramatics, the way Daniel had always communicated /you 2014, the way he now thought that Marcus must have grown up experiencing as coldness as withholding. He told him about the antiques fair and Gerald Fenn and the watch and what Gerald had told him. When he finished, Marcus was very still. I didn't, Marcus said. I know, Daniel said. He didn't know. He said it because he needed to see what came after it. I bought the watch at a market, Marcus said. His voice had gone careful /you 2014, the voice of someone organizing their thoughts quickly, and Daniel recognized that voice because it was his own voice, the voice he heard himself use at work when problems arrived that required management. The Pemberton Street Market. I went specifically to find you something. I /you 2014. He stopped, his jaw tightened. It was a private cellar, a stall I'd never seen before, an older man. He had a lot of antique pieces, and this one /you 2014, Dad, this one had the ship engraved on it. And you always told me /you 2014 when I was small, you always told me you wanted to sail. You said when you retired you'd get a boat. Daniel had forgotten he'd ever said that. I thought it was /you 2014. I thought it meant something. Marcus's face was doing something complicated. I had the inscription added. I took it to a jewelry shop on Clement Street and had them engrave the back, then I mailed it. Between when you bought it and when you mailed it, Daniel said carefully, where did you keep it? Here, on my dresser, for about 3 weeks while I figured out what to write. 3 weeks in which anyone with access to Marcus's apartment could have handled the watch. Does Nadia have a key? Daniel said. Does anyone else have a key? Her name wasn't Nadia as it turned out, that was the name Daniel had been given. Her real name was Claire Acaffer and she was not Marcus's girlfriend of 8 months, she was Marcus's girlfriend of 8 months who had also, for the previous 2 years, been the intimate companion of Daniel's business partner Raymond Holt. Raymond, who stood to inherit Daniel's share of their property management company if Daniel died without a will /U 2014, and Daniel, organized in all things except his own mortality, had never made a will. Raymond, who had known about the birthday, who had known about Marcus's habit of advance planning gifts and holding on to them, who had enough access to Claire /U 2014 to Nadia /U 2014 to have asked her to do one small thing. Daniel found this out over the following 3 weeks, not through dramatic revelation but through the slow, methodical accumulation of facts that he'd spent 30 years learning how to gather. He was good at this, he was very good at this. It turned out that the qualities that had made him a mediocre father /U 2014, the patience, the precision, the ability to sit with discomfort without reaction /U 2014 made him an effective investigator of his own attempted murder. He went to the doctor, he was fine. Borderline, the toxicologist said when Daniel finally told her the full story /U 2014 borderline, another month and things might have been different, but as it stood he was fine. He went to the police. That process was slower, less satisfying, more procedural than any story would have it be. There were interviews and evidence submissions and long stretches of nothing. He went